Welcome to the Rehoboth Baptist Church Sunday School Rewind, where we recap the week's Sunday school lessons. I'm Karen Walker Brown, and this week I'll be giving the Sunday school lesson summary. Please subscribe to our RBC YouTube channel and click the notification bell to be notified of our next upload. Our lesson for this week is all for one and one for all, with our scripture text coming from Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, verses 21 through 28. So when you hear this title, what do you think? Well, if you're of a certain age, your mind may go back to the Three Musketeers, the book and later the movie by Alexandre Dumas. The Three Musketeers was a historical romance that relayed the adventures of fictional swashbuckling heroes. And a musketeer was a man in the king's army that had muskets in addition to swords. So it's in this story where the motto, all for one and one for all, was popularized. And what it means is that all the members of a group support each of the individual members, and the individual members pledge to support the group. Now, this is the type of unity we're going to talk about in our lesson on today. So what do you know about Ezekiel? Ezekiel was a priest who was living in Jerusalem during the Babylonian attacks on the city, where a number of the residents of the city were deported and taken into exile. During the first instance, we can recall that Daniel and his friends were taken to serve in the king's palace. And in the second instance, Ezekiel and all of the officers and fighting men and all the skilled workers and artisans, a total of 10,000 people, were deported, and only the poorest people of the land were left. And we can find that story in 2 Kings, the 24th chapter, verses 12 through 14. So Ezekiel was one who painted very graphic word pictures. And one of the most well-known was the Valley of the Dry Bones. But also in the scriptures leading up to today's lesson, he gives another illustration of two sticks, where he writes on one of them for Judah and the children of Israel and his companions, and for the other, he writes for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all of the house of Israel and his companions. And all of this is in the 37th chapter, verse 16. So the 37th chapter of Ezekiel contains a prophecy of the Jews' return from captivity to their own land. And it talks about the union of these tribes with one another and of the glorious kingdom of Christ among them. So Ezekiel foretells this by symbolically joining those two sticks together to form the future union of the two kingdoms under one head of the lineage of David. And just as those two sticks were united, Israel and Judah were to be reunited into one kingdom. So as we go through our lesson on today, and again, our scripture text is Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, verses 21 through 28. As a result of our lesson, we will understand how the unity of God's people in the covenant of peace reveals God to us and to the nations. We're going to value unity over our own personal preference. And we're going to grow to examine sources of disunity within the church and develop a plan for peace and harmony. So let's jump right into our lesson. Our lesson was divided into two scripture sections, and the first of which was Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, verses 21 through 24. And I'll read those scriptures from the New Living Translation. And give them this message from the sovereign Lord. I will gather the people of Israel among the nations. I will bring them home to their own land from the places where they have been scattered. I will unify them from one nation on the mountain of Israel. One king will rule them all. No longer will they be divided into two nations or into two kingdoms. They will never again pollute themselves with the idols and vile images and rebellion, for I will save them from their sinful apostasy. I will cleanse them. Then they will truly be my people, and I will be their God. My servant David will be their king, and they will have only one shepherd. They will obey my regulations and be careful to keep my decrees. So what we have here is the promise of the reunion. Ezekiel is delivering God's message of hope to the divided tribes of Israel. The Lord is promising to bring his people back from exile, reunite the two kingdoms, and that's represented by the divided sticks in the prophet's hand. And what this is this symbolizes God's unwavering commitment to his people, despite their disobedience and the consequences they faced. And what this does is it teaches us that God is faithful, he is merciful, and he's always ready to restore and reconcile. These verses also tell us about the unity through the Messiah. God is declaring that King David will be their eternal prince. And what he's doing is highlighting the role of a messianic figure in their restoration. And this is foretelling the coming of Jesus Christ, who will bring ultimate unity and reconciliation through his life, his death, and his resurrection. And this passage is also emphasizing that true unity can only be achieved through the Messiah. And this teaches us the significance of Jesus in bridging those divisions and reconciling humanity with God. Our next set of scriptures is unity displayed, and that's the 25th through the 28th verses, again from the New Living Translation. They will live in the land I gave my servant Jacob, the land where their ancestors lived. They and their children and their grandchildren after them will live there forever, generation after generation. And my servant David will be their prince forever. And I will make a covenant of peace with them, an everlasting covenant. I will give them their land and increase their numbers, and I will put my temple among them forever. I will make my home among them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. And then my temple is among them forever. The nations know that I am the Lord who makes Israel holy. What do we see in these verses? A dwelling place for God. This passage is revealing that God's desire to dwell among his people forever. He's promising to make a covenant of peace with them, ensuring that his sanctuary will be in their midst. And this is illustrating God's longing for that intimate relationship with his people, and it highlights the importance of creating a space where God's presence can dwell. As believers, we learn the value of cultivating that personal and collective environment that invites God's presence to transform our lives as well as those of our community. This verse also shows us the reconciliation of the nations. God's plan extends beyond the restoration of Israel. He reveals his intention to gather all nations who will acknowledge him as the Lord. This inclusive vision portrays a future where all people, regardless of their backgrounds, will come together in worship and in unity. This is reminding us that our responsibility to work towards reconciliation. We need to break down barriers. We need to embrace diversity and wait the fulfillment of God's grand plan. So this entire lesson is a message of hope, restoration, and unity. It teaches us that God's faithfulness extends even in the face of division and exile. Through the promised Messiah, who is Jesus Christ, God will bring about reconciliation and invites us to participate in his plan of unity for all nations. As we reflect on these lessons, Hopefully we'll be inspired to pursue reconciliation, to embrace diversity, and to create spaces where God's presence can dwell, fostering unity and love among his people. So how can we apply these verses to our lives? We can embrace God's promises. Just as God promised restoration and unity to his people, we can trust in his promises for our own lives. We need to take time to study and meditate on the promises that are found in the Bible and allow them to strengthen our faith and provide us hope in those difficult times. Remember that God is faithful and his promises will be fulfilled in his perfect timing. We need to pursue reconciliation. God's desire for unity and reconciliation is evident in these passages. We should actively seek reconciliation in our relationships, both with God and with others. If there are broken or strained relationships in our lives, we need to take the initiative to reach out, forgive, and seek resolution. We need to cultivate a spirit of grace, understanding, and humility as we seek to restore and build those bridges. We can recognize Jesus as the source of unity. Ezekiel's prophecy points to Jesus Christ as the ultimate source of unity and reconciliation. So in our daily lives, we need to acknowledge Jesus as the cornerstone of our faith and the foundation for unity. We need to seek to align our thoughts and our actions and our relationships with his teaching and his example. We can let his love and his grace flow through us and inspiring unity and reconciliation in all areas of our lives. We need to create space for God's presence. Just as God promised to dwell among his people, we can also create space for God's presence in our lives. It's as simple as setting aside regular time for prayer, regular time for meditation, and for worship. We can each create an atmosphere of reverence and openness to God's leading. We can also strive to foster an environment of love, of peace, and unity in our home, in our workplace, and in the community. We've got to be intentional about inviting others to experience God's presence through our actions and our words. We can also learn from this lesson to embrace diversity. God's vision of unity encompasses all nations and all people. And we can apply this by embracing diversity and actively seeking to understand and appreciate different cultures, different perspectives, and different backgrounds. We can break down our own prejudices and biases and cultivate inclusiveness and a welcoming attitude towards others. We can engage in conversations and take part in initiatives that promote unity, justice, and equality for all. We can work towards a future of unity. So while we await the complete fulfillment of God's plan for unity, we can be actively working towards it in our own spheres of influence. We can engage in acts of service, of justice, and compassion that promote unity and reconciliation. We can seek opportunities to bridge divides and bring people together, regardless of their differences. And remember that our actions, no matter how small, can contribute to God's plan of unity. So if we incorporate these tips into our lives, they will allow us to apply the teachings that we've learned today in Ezekiel 37 chapter, verses 21 through 28, and participate in God's transformative work of unity and reconciliation. So thank you for joining us for this week's Sunday School lesson review. If you like this video on YouTube, please comment on it in the comments and make sure you share it with someone else. You can also comment on the lesson on Facebook or in Rehoboth's members only realm. We look forward to seeing you next time on the RBC Sunday School Rewind.